Hello my fair friends, I'm Ruby Ruse, this is Baby Bunny, and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Bunny. So, here we are. I'm hoping to later today do a ritual for the fairies outside because it's a beautiful day here in Chicago, Illinois. You might hear some music drifting in. I'm just going to hope that my neighbors are not having a party, they're just enjoying music by themselves. I'm just gonna let that go. So I have no control over the music, but hey, we'll all enjoy it together. But as I was saying, I wanted to get outside and do a ritual for the fairies outside in my backyard, and so one of the ways to attract the fae is to offer them a gift, and today we're going to make an offering of fairy cakes. Now, fairy cakes are a traditional dessert that comes from, I believe, Wales, I think. But definitely it's an English dish. So I will have the recipe that I converted down below. I'll have the original one. But this, Bunny and I live in America, so I had to make some adjustments because the measurements are different here in America. So I will have those adjustments that I made down below as well. So to be honest, I have never made raspberry fairy cakes ever before in my life. So they could be awful. Hopefully they won't be. So that is what we are making today for you. I'm so excited. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make our own raspberry puree. So actually the raspberries I'm using are ones that I grew myself. They're really getting to their point where they need to be used up because you can freeze raspberries for up to 12 months, so they're right at their, they're getting there. They're close. So I really need to use these raspberries up before I get a new crop of them. So the raspberry puree that we're making today, we actually only need 2 tablespoons for the icing that we're going to be making, but you can use raspberry puree in 100 different ways, I've learned. You can put it over cheesecake, which is very nice. And then the other thing that I learned is that you can put it in hot chocolate, which is what I'm gonna do, and I'm so excited about that, I can't wait. So anyway, the recipe for raspberry puree is so simple. You need 12 ounces of raspberries. I just use a scale to measure them with, so I don't convert the ounces. So 12 ounces of raspberries, mine were frozen. Then I used a half a cup of sugar and then a 1/4 of a cup of water. And then we're gonna put it on the stove and get it to a boil so that we can make it into a syrup. Alright, so while that is starting to do its thing, I thought we would start with the fairy cakes themselves. So we're going to start out with a full stick of butter, which is a half a cup of butter, and we're going to add to that a matching half cup of sugar. And then we're going to take an electric mixer and we're going to cream that together. I'm going to show you what creamed sugar and butter looks like. You just want it kind of like fluffy. Does it look fluffy? It's fluffy. We're going to say fluffy. And I set up my fairy cups ahead of time. So I put paper cups in muffin tin. And this is about just a little over a cup of raspberries. And if you see that I have some yellow ones in there, my garden grows both red and yellow raspberries. So this was about a cup of raspberries, and I just put enough in to fill the bottom of the paper cups. And I hear that my puree is boiling, so I'm going to grab my silicone spatula because I'm going to need this later. So I'm just going to give that a stir. And to make the puree, it says just to, boil these until it, the raspberries kind of break up and the water kind of boils down and it becomes thick and syrupy. And mine were frozen, so I'm kind of breaking up the pieces with my spatula. So since that was boiling, I'm actually going to set a timer for 5 minutes so that I don't get distracted and forget them. But I'm going to go back and forth and stir them up occasionally while they're kind of simmering. All right, so back to the fairy cakes. So after we've creamed our butter, we're going to add 2 eggs to this. Now I've already pre-beaten these, and it says add by a spoonful, but I think that's a little more anal than I want to be. So I'm just going to put a little drip in as I'm mixing. And actually, my brat cat, Castiel, just loves to lick the egg bowl, as does Crowley Cat. So I'm going to put this off on the floor so that the kitties can have it. I've never made raspberry puree before either. Usually I make raspberry pie, but I wanted to try fairy cakes because I thought that would be easier to leave as an offering outside. So that's what I'm doing. Plus, why wouldn't I want to make fairy cakes? That just is so exciting to me. Alright, the next thing that we're going to add is we're going to add vanilla extract. Now this original recipe calls for almond extract, and I'm not real crazy about almond extract. I just think it has kind of a bitter flavor, which makes sense, it's almonds. So I'm going to use vanilla extract instead. That'll make it a little more American. I can tell that my Celtic relatives are turning over in their graves right now. But it calls for 1 teaspoon of almond extract. Usually it calls for, if you're going to use vanilla in place of almond extract, you want to use a little bit more. So I'm going to be daring. I've never made these before. And they might be awful. They might be so bad, oh, they might be just terrible. So I'm going to double it, and I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of vanilla in there. Stirring the puree again. I'm going to tip this so you can you see that a little bit? It's very, the raspberries have almost disintegrated. And there's my timer. To me, this still seems a little bit runny. It's not a syrupy yet. So I think what I'm going to do, and that might be because I used frozen raspberries rather than fresh raspberries, so I'm going to add 1 more minute. And like I said, I'm going to set a timer just so that I don't get distracted and forget about it. You enjoying that? Making music with my bowls and things? Yeah. Okay. Put those in the sink to be washed because I will need those later when I make the raspberry icing for the fairy cakes. Now with this, it says, and there's my timer. So I'm thinking this is probably going to thicken up a little bit more when it cools down, but there was only 1/4 cup of water in here. The liquid that we're seeing is straight raspberry juice here. So I'm going to take that off the heat and let it sit there just for a second. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So I am going to grab a wooden spoon. They really love metal spoons because in Britain, because they hold the cold a lot better. But I don't have any metal spoons because I'm American. So I'm going to use a wooden mixing spoon for this, because now what it says to do is that you want to fold in 1/2 cup of flour. I know it's weird, there's only 1/2 cup of flour in this recipe, so that because this is the 2020 quarantine, I am having a difficult time finding certain staples, as I'm sure all of you can relate to. So actually one of the things that is difficult to come by right now is flour, So this recipe actually called for standard flour, but I didn't have that because I ran out. What I'm using is cake flour. I don't really prefer cake flour for cupcakes because cupcakes you want to hold their shape a little bit better. Cake, when it's in a bigger pan, that moistness and that fluffiness from the cake flour is really nice and gives a great texture to a full cake. But that can be difficult when you're doing standalone cupcakes. I think it doesn't hold the shape as well. So we will see, but this is all I had so there you go. And if you don't know what folding is, so because this is only a half a cup, I'm going to sprinkle about a half of that, so about a fourth of a cup on the top of that batter that I made. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your spoon and you're going to scrape the bottom and fold it over. Scrape the bottom and fold it over. And be super, super gentle. Because when a recipe calls for folding, usually what that means is they don't want you to mix super harshly because that will affect the consistency of your batters. You don't want to be too harsh with your mixing because it can make your final product rather hard and stiff. So now that I've got that mixed in, I'm going to sprinkle the rest of that flour over the top. And once again, I'm going to scrape the bottom and fold it over. And I'm going to continue to do that super softly and gently until all that flour is mixed in. I see now why it only called for half a cup of flour. Apparently you don't need more than a half a cup. So now we're going to take our pan that I prepared with the raspberries, and I'm going to take a spoonful on the wooden spoon, and I'm going to use this second spoon to push that into the cake pan. And once again, I'm going to be as gentle as possible because I don't want hard fairy cakes. I'm going to grab a small spatula to really scrape the remaining. So now what I'm doing is, since I have my fairy cups all filled, I'm just going to take my spoon and gently push the batter over the top so that the raspberries are completely covered. Now, probably the batter will spread out when it bakes, but I don't trust it. I have no faith. So I'm just real gently patting it so I don't see any raspberries. But like I said, when something calls for folding, that's usually a guide that you want to be very, very careful. You don't want to over-mix it. Because if you do, you'll end up with gummy, hard cakes. And that's not what you want. You want this to be nice and soft. All right, so there we go. There's my cup, there's my little fairy cakes. And then it says to place it in an oven at 350 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. I made my own baby food when my son was itty bitty. I did. I didn't buy any pre-made baby food in the grocery store. And this is how I made it, so I know exactly what to do here. This is called a sieve, and this is a very fine mesh strainer or colander. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it inside this bowl. Now this puree is going to be, it's still pretty hot. Now, as you can see, it's really not individual berries anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour some of it inside the sieve. This is going to make a mess. And I'm wearing a white dress again. I love it. Oh, I'm just brave. I'm just trusting, aren't I? So the reason, remember that I said I picked up my heavy-duty silicone spatula because this is how I made baby food. You take the sauce and I'm going to push it through the sieve. And the reason that you want the really fine mesh is that it's going to press all of the fruit and it's going to leave behind the seeds. But if you don't have a sieve, you know, if your puree has seeds in it, it's raspberries, people deal with it. It's not that serious. Not that serious, people. But this is how I made baby food. I never made raspberry baby food, though. I didn't have raspberries until after my son was old enough to talk. When he was a toddler and he was just learning speech, he decided that he wanted to have a garden. So I'm not very good at gardening. I just missed that gene. But my brother, who lives in Arizona, is just this amazing wild creature. Not wild in the sense that he's rambunctious. He's like the most stable person I know. But I love to hear that. It's such pretty music coming in. It's not my fault. I have no control. I'm not playing this music. It's filtering in. So please don't report me. It's not my fault. Anyway, my brother is this amazing woodland spirit. He got more of the puka genes, actually. And he, I called him up and I said, what do I do? And he said, oh, well, I could tell you, or I could show you. And so he came up to see us, and he helped us plant our very first garden. So now we have all these raspberries. Unfortunately, the truth about raspberries is they're kind of like beautiful weeds, actually. They're beautiful weeds. They will take over. So, you know, not that I really all that mind. My son certainly doesn't mind. And they just keep populating, you know, they just grow and grow and outgrow, and they will kind of take over. So you do have to be careful about that. Another thing that I really like to make is yogurt. Yogurt's actually really easy to make. And I do like it unflavored because actually yogurt can be very naturally sweet if you make it yourself. But I do like to add things to it. Yogurt and honey is really a great thing. That would be another really great offering to the Fae, is plain yogurt with a little bit of honey added to it. But, oh my goodness, to put some raspberry puree on my yogurt, oh, that'd be like eating candy for breakfast. Oh my goodness, I can't wait to try that. That's going to be my next mission, is to make more yogurt. So when I press these through the sieve, you also want to get, this is the best stuff. This is like the thick stuff on the bottom. So you want to scrape all that off, because that's the best part of it. So I scraped the thick stuff off the bottom, and I'm going to see if I can push any more through here. No, it looks like I've pretty much gotten all that I'm going to get out of this. So I'll show you the inside of the sieve. You'll see that I have this kind of mush at the bottom, but it's not going through because this is mostly just seeds right here. So I think I'm just going to clean that out and call it a day with this because it's just not pushing through anymore. Alright, so you'll see that my puree is just a little bit thicker in some areas because the liquid was what pushed through first. So I'm just gonna stir this a little bit to mix in the thicker points with the liquid. So I do have some seeds that push through, but I'm not real worried about that. It's raspberries, people, they have seeds. Well, our timer is going off, so let's check those. So I have these great big long toothpicks. They're for like they're skewers for like shish kebab and that kind of thing. I'm gonna say that's a no. That's a no on those. They look pretty liquidy to me. Those don't need 5 more minutes. They need like 10. Well, I'm gonna do 5 more minutes and then but I would guess that they need 10 minutes. So the recipe said 15 minutes at 350. No. I've never made these before. Never. Well, while that is baking, I'm just going to clean up a little bit. Just a tip. You're going to want to, if you're not planning on like seriously washing your equipment right away, you're definitely going to want to rinse off the cake batter because especially a sponge cake like this will just make like glue if it gets hard, if it sets and gets left on there. Yeah, so rinse your bowls if you're not washing them right away. All right, well, for the icing, the raspberry icing, you just need 2 tablespoons of the puree. This is a lot more than 2 tablespoons. A little bit more. A little bit. But like I said, I have plans for this. I am going to get some hot chocolate. And I am going to put it in the hot chocolate. I'll tell you how that goes later. So the icing calls for 2 tablespoons of our delicious puree that we've made. Well, at least I hope it's delicious. Maybe it's terrible. I don't know. I've never made this, so. All right, let's check those fairy cakes. I don't think they're done. I don't. These are better. They are not done. Oh, some of them are getting there. All right. I'm thinking maybe not 5 minutes. We're gonna do 3. So while they're still baking, I put my 2 tablespoons of puree in here. And then it says, it said to add sugar, but it was once again in grams. So I'm here, I started with 3/4 powdered sugar. And with icing, you want to sift the sugar. So I have another sieve because this is an easy way to do sifted sugars. Is you just take it and thump it. It's always at this point that I'm like, is this too much sugar? I'm gonna put it all in. I'm putting a whole this is a 3/4 cup. I did not set a timer. So it seems that my timer did not go, I did not set it correctly. So I'm glad that I noticed that. Oh no, it went off just now, just as I suspected that it was time. So I'm just poking to make sure that nothing comes off on my testing stick here. So it looks like it's pretty well done. Finally, I got it. Okay. Right. So you can turn that off. It says that you should leave them in the pan for 5 minutes and then transfer them to a cooling rack. So they could be awful. Well, I tell you, if you want a beautiful red frosting, use raspberry puree. Look at that. That is like the most beautiful pinkish red I have ever seen. It's so pretty. All right, we're back. The fairy cakes are not quite cool yet, but I'm anxious to get outside and do my ritual. So I'm gonna go ahead and frost these cakes now. And I do want to taste one before I give it to the Fae, because if it's terrible, I don't want to give them terrible fairy cakes. I'm hoping they're not terrible. I'm hoping. I did taste the icing. The raspberry puree is the most awesome thing I've ever tasted in my life. It was so good. So the recipe did call for a couple of tablespoons of water. I tend to like my frosting a little bit thicker, so I didn't add any extra liquid. Oh my goodness, with just the 1/4 of a cup of sugar and the 2 tablespoons of raspberry puree, it is like, oh, I can't, it's so good. So what I do with cupcakes is I just take a bit on the top of just a regular knife. There are like frosting tools that you can get, and but I keep going back to just a plain butter knife. And I usually start from the center and then push it out towards the edges, because I just think that that gives a nice clean line. And I have done fancier things with cupcakes, so I am capable of doing more than just plain frosting. Fairies do like sweet things, but you're going to want to be very careful about artificial things. I do have a very wild puka that likes to come visit. And he was a little upset once that I didn't have anything to give him. So I did end up giving him some, like, I think what was it? It was some kind of orange licorice or something. It was really something really strange. And he was so upset that I just gave him all of this licorice that I had. And he took it and he ate it. But generally speaking, they're not going to be drawn to store-bought candies. The Fae like naturally sweet things that have been made with honey. They do like sugar cane. So this, of course, has a lot of sugar in it. But sugar is something that exists in nature. So please don't give the fairies Splenda. Don't give the fairies corn syrup. Corn syrup is actually toxic to bees, and so that corn syrup can actually be very toxic to some of the smaller breeds of the Fae. So be very, very careful that you don't give them a gift that has corn syrup in that. That's going to be very dangerous for them. Now, normally I would let the Fae have the first taste of something that I make for them. But like I said, I've never made these before, and I just want to check and make sure that they're worthy of them. Because I don't want to offend them by giving them something that's subpar. I do know that the frosting is fantabulous. Oh my god, it's so good. but we'll see. Maybe awful. I don't know. I'm running out of frosting. Might not be enough. I don't know. We'll see. These might be lighter in frosting. I'll save the best ones for the Fae. Now, some Fae prefer certain types of gifts. For example, pukas really love fresh blackberries. Most house spirits, because most houses have some kind of a spirit that lives in there. Brownies or pixies are often, and a very tiny form of fairy often lives in homes. They really enjoy milk and honey. When you give an offering of a food substance to a fairy, a lot of times they will not necessarily actually consume the item, but if you pick it up, it will feel like old paper. Like when you pick it up, it will have that. It won't feel like it's heavy enough, so it will feel, the feeling of it will be very confusing. So that's a sign that they've eaten it. And a lot of fairies are able to shapeshift, so if you see a raccoon stealing away the raspberries, that's fine, because let me tell you, a forest creature would not offend a fairy. Would not offend a fairy by taking their raspberries unless they've been given permission to do so. And it is possible that instead of a raccoon, it could be a puka in disguise. So just know that. So here is the finished product. They look so pretty. They look pretty, and I don't know if they'll taste nice, but. So I'm going to choose one of the ones that isn't as pretty as the other one. So I'm going to take this one because it's not as pretty as some. And I'm going to open it up and test it out. So, now I'm not crazy about the bottom of these fairy cakes. If I were to do this next time, I would probably put half the batter down first and then put the raspberries in the center. Oh my fairy blood is just surging right now. This is definitely a gift worthy of the Fae. So if you do make these fairy cakes, please let me know down below and tell me if you had any contact. I would be curious to know. And I am planning on doing the ritual very shortly. So if I post, whichever one I post before, I will definitely have the two videos linked together. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Cooking with Bunny. There's Bunny over there watching the fairy cakes for me. And until next time, have a fairyful day.